There are days that pass like whispers unnoticed, unmarked, forgotten by the rhythm of ordinary life. And then there are days like this, days that don't just arrive, they interrupt. July 27th is not just a date on a calendar. It is a divine summons. A moment etched in the unseen realm long before you ever woke up this morning. And the fact that you are here, right now, reading this is not random. It is not coincidence. It is not algorithm. It is alignment. Something pulled you here. Maybe you were scrolling without thinking. Maybe your mind was distracted, your heart heavy, your spirit searching for something you couldn't quite name. Or maybe everything looked fine on the outside, but deep inside, you've been feeling it. That quiet, persistent tension. That unshakable sense that something is shifting around you and you don't fully understand what it is yet. That feeling, that's not anxiety. That's awareness. And on July 27th, that awareness is being activated. Archangel Michael speaks, not in noise, not in chaos, but in precision. His voice cuts through confusion like lightning through a storm, and what he reveals now is this. You have entered a moment that was prepared specifically for you. Not for everyone. Not for the crowd. For you. Because something about your life has never been ordinary. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how your journey never quite follows the same pattern as others? How things come with resistance that doesn't seem to make sense? How even in your quiet seasons, it feels like you're being watched, not always physically, but energetically, spiritually. You felt it. The moments when conversations shift when you enter a room. The times when people observe you more than they engage with you. The strange awareness that your life seems to carry more weight, more tension, more attention than it should. You told yourself it was nothing. You brushed it off. You tried to normalize it. But what if it was never normal? What if July 27th is the day you finally understand why? Because here is the truth that Archangel Michael is revealing in this moment. You were marked before you were understood. Before people misjudged you. Before they labeled you. Before they distanced themselves or tried to figure you out, there was already something placed on your life that made you stand out in ways you couldn't control. And that mark, it didn't just attract favor. It attracted attention. Seen and unseen. This is why your life has felt like a pattern of almost being understood, but never fully. Of being close to breakthrough, but facing strange resistance right before it happens. A feeling like you're walking a path that no one around you can fully relate to. Because you're not walking a common path. You're walking a watched path. And July 27th is not here to scare you. It's here to reveal you. To pull back the veil just enough for you to see that what you've been sensing all along is real. That the tension, the observation, the silent opposition, it all has a reason. And that reason is not because you are weak, it's because you are significant. But here's where most people miss it. When the pressure increases, they shrink. When the attention feels uncomfortable, they hide. When the opposition becomes confusing, they start questioning themselves. And maybe you've done that too. Maybe you've dimmed your light just to feel normal. Maybe you've stayed quiet just to avoid being misunderstood. Maybe you've walked away from your own instincts just to keep peace with people who never truly saw you. But July 27th changes that. Because this is not just a day of awareness. This is a day of awakening. Archangel Michael is not just observing your situation, he is stepping into it. And his message is clear. You were never meant to live unseen, unrecognized, or ordinary. You were meant to understand why your life feels different. You were meant to recognize the patterns. You were meant to stop questioning your sensitivity and start trusting it. Because what you feel is not random. What you sense is not imagination. What you've been noticing is not coincidence. It is confirmation. And this is only the beginning. Something is about to be revealed to you. About the watchers, about the opposition, about the reason your life has carried this unusual weight. But before that revelation comes, you need to accept this first truth. You are not where you are by accident. You are here because heaven needed your attention now. And if you ignore this moment, you may continue seeing the patterns, but never understanding them. But if you stay, if you lean in, if you allow your spirit to fully receive what is being revealed, everything you've been questioning will start to make sense. So don't rush this. Don't dismiss this. Because July 27th is not just another day. It is the day your awareness becomes clarity and your confusion begins to turn into calling. And Archangel Michael is just getting started. Type "I am aware" in the comments if you feel this message awakening something inside you. Blessing code 1717 is now surrounding you. There is something you have felt but never fully explained. Not to others. Not even to yourself. It shows up in the quiet moments. In the pauses between conversations. In the subtle shifts of energy when you walk into a room and something just feels off. You can't prove it. You can't point to it directly. But you know it's there. That unspoken awareness that you are being observed in ways that go beyond the physical. And what Archangel Michael reveals now is this: you were never imagining it. There have always been eyes on you. Not always literal eyes. Not always people staring in obvious ways. But attention-focused, intentional attention that follows your movement, your growth, your decisions. You may have noticed how certain people seem to know things about you without you ever telling them. How your actions somehow become topics of discussion in spaces you've never entered. How your silence speaks louder than your words in rooms where you barely even exist. You felt watched even when no one was looking. And you dismissed it. You told yourself you were overthinking. You tried to rationalize it. You convinced yourself that it was just coincidence, just timing, just your mind trying to connect dots that weren't really there. But deep down, your spirit never agreed with that explanation. Because your spirit recognized something your mind wasn't ready to accept. You are not just living your life. You are being observed while you live it. And that observation is not random. Archangel Michael speaks with clarity here. The attention surrounding your life is tied to your significance. There is something about your presence, your path, your energy that naturally draws focus. Even when you try to stay quiet. Even when you try to remain unnoticed. Even when you withdraw and keep to yourself, the attention does not fully disappear. It lingers. It follows. It waits. This is why you've experienced moments where people seem to study you more than they support you. Where they analyze your decisions instead of understanding them. Where they watch your growth from a distance, but rarely celebrate it openly. There is a quiet observation that surrounds your life, and it has created a tension you've carried without fully understanding why. But here is where the truth deepens. Not all watchers are the same. Some observe out of curiosity. They see something different in you, something they cannot define, and instead of engaging, they watch. They try to figure you out from a distance, because your presence challenges their understanding of what is normal. You don't fit into easy categories. You don't move in predictable ways, and that unsettles them. Others observe out of comparison. They measure themselves against you, silently tracking your progress, your choices, your timing. They don't always wish you harm. but they cannot ignore the way your life makes them reflect on their own. And instead of confronting that reflection, they turn their focus outward toward you. And then there are those who observe with intention, not admiration, not curiosity, intention. These are the ones who pay close attention to your patterns, who notice when you are strong and when you are vulnerable, who track your movements, your decisions, your shifts in energy. They don't always reveal themselves. In fact, they rarely do. Their presence is subtle, almost invisible, but their awareness of you is sharp. This is why certain interactions feel heavier than they should, why some conversations leave you drained without clear reason, why some people seem to carry an energy that lingers long after they are gone. Because observation is not always passive. Sometimes it is active. And Archangel Michael reveals that your life has attracted both seen and unseen observation because of what you carry. There is a weight to your presence, a depth to your path that naturally draws attention from different directions. Not because you are trying to stand out, but because you were never designed to blend in. Even when you attempt to live quietly, your spirit speaks. Even when you choose silence, your energy communicates. Even when you withdraw, your absence is noticed. This is why you have felt that strange awareness at times, that sense that something is paying attention even when everything appears calm. It is not fear. It is not paranoia. It is perception. It is your sensitivity recognizing that your life exists in a space where attention follows purpose. But here is the part you must understand. Being watched does not mean being vulnerable. Being observed does not mean being unprotected. Because while there are eyes that watch, there is also protection that surrounds. There is a presence that stands between you and anything that seeks to move beyond observation into interference. Archangel Michael does not reveal this to create fear. He reveals it to create awareness. Because awareness changes how you move. It changes how you speak. It changes how you trust your instincts. You begin to notice what you once ignored. You begin to sense what you once dismissed. You begin to understand that your life is not unfolding in isolation, but within a field of attention that responds to your alignment, your growth, your decisions. And this is why your next steps matter. Because the watchers do not define your path, but your awareness of them will refine it. You are not here to shrink because you are seen. You are not here to hide because attention follows you. You are here to understand that your life carries a visibility that requires discernment, not fear. And this is only the beginning of what is being revealed. Because the next truth will take you deeper into why this attention exists at all and what it says about who you were always meant to be. Type ISE clearly in the comments if this message resonates with your spirit. Blessing code 2020 is now surrounding you. There is a question that has followed you for most of your life, even if you never spoke it out loud. It is not always clear, not always fully formed, but it lingers beneath your thoughts like a quiet echo. Why has your life never felt ordinary? Why have your experiences, your relationships, your path always carried a different weight, a different rhythm, a different kind of resistance that others around you do not seem to face in the same way? You tried to ignore it. You tried to blend in. You tried to convince yourself that you were just like everyone else, that the differences you felt were exaggerated, that the tension you experienced was normal. But no matter how much you tried to settle into that belief, something inside you kept rising, reminding you that your story does not follow common patterns. And now Archangel Michael reveals the truth that answers that question once and for all. You were marked before you were formed. This mark is not visible to the human eye. It is not something you can point to in the mirror or explain in simple terms. But it is real. It was placed upon your life long before you had a name, long before you had a voice, long before you took your first breath. It is the reason your path has always carried meaning, even when it felt confusing. It is the reason your life attracts both favor and resistance at the same time. Because being marked means being recognized, not just by those who support you, but by forces that respond to purpose itself. This is why your life has never moved in a straight line. You have experienced moments of acceleration followed by sudden resistance. You have felt close to clarity, only to encounter confusion that seemed to appear out of nowhere. You have stepped into opportunities that felt aligned, only to face opposition that made no logical sense. And you ask yourself why. Why does it feel like every step forward is met with something pushing back? Why do things seem to intensify just when you begin to rise? Why does your journey feel like it carries more weight than it should? Because ordinary paths do not trigger extraordinary reactions, but yours does. Your presence carries something that disrupts patterns, that challenges stagnation, that shifts environments without you even trying. And when something carries that kind of influence, it does not go unnoticed. It is observed, it is measured, and at times, it is resisted. This is not because there is something wrong with you. It is because there is something significant about you. Archangel Michael makes this clear. The mark you carry is not a burden, even though it has felt like one at times. It is an assignment. It is the reason you cannot fully return to who you used to be, even when you try. It is the reason certain environments begin to feel uncomfortable as you grow. It is the reason some relationships shift without explanation, leaving you questioning what changed. What changed was you. Or more accurately, what changed was your alignment with what has always been within you. The mark does not appear suddenly. It reveals itself over time, through your awareness, through your sensitivity, through the way you begin to notice things others overlook, through the way you feel drawn to truth, even when it is uncomfortable, through the way you sense when something is not aligned, even if you cannot explain why. This is not coincidence. This is activation. And as this activation increases, so does the awareness around you. People begin to notice. Not always consciously, not always openly, but something about your presence becomes harder to ignore. You may not say much, but your silence carries weight. You may not seek attention, but attention finds you. You may try to remain in the background, but your energy refuses to stay there, because you were never meant to remain unseen. But here is where the tension begins. Being marked does not just attract recognition. It also attracts misunderstanding. People will try to define you based on what they can see, but they will never fully grasp what they cannot. They will interpret your silence as distance, your focus as detachment, your growth as change that they cannot relate to. And in their attempt to understand you, they may misjudge you, not because you have done something wrong, but because they are trying to explain something that was never meant to be ordinary. And this is where many lose themselves. They begin to shrink. They begin to question their instincts. They begin to adjust who they are just to fit into spaces that were never designed for them. But Archangel Michael speaks clearly in this moment. Do not confuse being misunderstood with being misplaced. You are not in the wrong place because others cannot understand you. You are not on the wrong path because it feels different. You are not meant to dilute what you carry just to make it easier for others to accept. Because what you carry was never meant to be common. It was meant to stand, to shift, to reveal. And the watchers, the attention, the resistance you have experienced, all of it traces back to this one truth. You were never meant to be ordinary. And once you accept that, everything begins to change. The confusion starts to clear. The patterns start to make sense. The resistance stops feeling random and starts revealing its purpose. You stop asking why your life feels different and you begin to understand that it was always meant to be. But this realization comes with responsibility. Because once you recognize the mark, you cannot ignore it. You cannot return to unawareness. You cannot pretend that your path is the same as everyone else's. And that is exactly why the next revelation matters. Because understanding the mark is only the beginning, but understanding what happens as you rise within it will change everything. Type IMSET apart in the comments if you receive this truth. Lesson code 3333 is now activated around you. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this. When you sow into this message, you are not supporting a voice. You are fueling a movement that awakens souls who have been living beneath their calling. Every seed you release becomes a light in someone else's darkness, a spark that reaches a heart on the edge of giving up. The word declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and today, that promise is speaking directly to you. I feel led to say this clearly. I am stepping into this moment, and I will not ignore the call to give. This is not a casual action. It is a prophetic response to what heaven is doing right now. Your generosity becomes a river, flowing through PayPal links in the description, and even through the QR code placed before you, reaching lives you may never see, but heaven will always count. As you give, expect doors to open, clarity to increase, and favor to follow you in ways you cannot predict. And now act, release your seed, and become part of what God is multiplying through this message. There is a moment in every journey where things should feel easier, but instead, they become heavier. A moment where you expect peace, yet tension rises. Where you anticipate clarity, yet confusion tries to creep in. And if you are honest with yourself, you have been in that moment more than once. You have stepped forward with intention, with focus, with quiet determination to move into something better, only to feel resistance meet you almost immediately. And it has made you question everything. Why now? Why when things were finally starting to make sense? Why when you were finally gaining momentum? Why does it feel like every time you get close to something meaningful, something pushes back just as strongly? Archangel Michael speaks into this with unwavering clarity. Opposition does not increase because you are off track, it increases because you are approaching alignment. This is a law that most people never fully understand. They interpret resistance as a sign to stop. They see difficulty as confirmation that something is wrong. They assume that if the path were right, it would be smooth, effortless, and free from tension. But that assumption keeps them stuck in cycles they were meant to outgrow. Because the truth is this: elevation always disrupts something. When you begin to rise, you do not just move upward, you move out of spaces that once held you. You move beyond patterns that once defined you. You shift away from environments, mindsets, and even people who were aligned with your previous level. And that shift creates friction. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are doing something different. This is why opposition intensifies at the exact moment you begin to step into something greater. It is not random. It is not personal in the way it feels. It is a reaction to movement, to change, to the breaking of patterns that have existed for longer than you realize. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how challenges seem to appear right before a breakthrough? How distractions suddenly increase when you are trying to focus? How doubt becomes louder when you are on the edge of a decision that could change everything? That is not coincidence. That is resistance responding to elevation. And the reason it feels so intense is because it is designed to make you pause, to make you second guess, to make you retreat back into what is familiar, what is comfortable, what is predictable. Because familiarity does not require growth, and growth is what disrupts everything. But you were not called to remain where you are comfortable. You were called to move. And movement always draws opposition. Archangel Michael reveals that what you have been experiencing is not a sign to stop, but a sign to pay attention. Because opposition carries information. It reveals where your growth is creating impact. It shows you where your presence is beginning to shift the environment around you. It highlights the exact areas where your elevation is most significant. This is why the resistance feels targeted. Because it is. Not in a way that is meant to harm you beyond recovery, but in a way that tests your awareness. Your ability to recognize what is happening without losing yourself in it. Your ability to continue moving forward without being pulled back by the pressure. And this is where many people lose momentum. They interpret the intensity as a warning instead of a confirmation. They step back just when they should step forward. They silence themselves just when their voice is needed. They return to old patterns just when they are on the edge of breaking them. And the cycle repeats. But Archangel Michael makes this clear: you are not meant to repeat cycles. You are meant to recognize them. To see the pattern for what it is. To understand that the increase in pressure is not meant to crush you, but to reveal your position. To show you that you are no longer where you used to be, even if part of you still feels connected to it. Because elevation changes perspective. What once felt normal begins to feel limiting. What once felt comfortable begins to feel restrictive. What once made sense begins to feel misaligned. And that misalignment creates tension. But that tension is not your enemy. It is your signal. A signal that you are moving beyond what you once accepted. A signal that your awareness is expanding. A signal that your path is shifting in a way that requires you to respond differently. And this is where your choice becomes critical. You can either interpret the opposition as a reason to retreat, or you can recognize it as confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. Because opposition does not follow those who remain still. It follows those who move with purpose. Those who begin to break patterns. Those who step into alignment even when it feels unfamiliar. Those who choose growth over comfort. And that is exactly what you have been doing. Even in moments where you doubted yourself. Even in moments where you questioned your decisions. Even in moments where the pressure felt heavier than you expected. You kept moving. And that is why the opposition has increased. Not to stop you, but because it cannot ignore you. Because your elevation is no longer potential. It is becoming reality. And reality demands response. But here is the truth you must hold on to as you move forward. Opposition may rise, but it does not have the authority to define your outcome. It can create noise, but it cannot change your direction unless you allow it to. It can introduce pressure, but it cannot remove what has already been placed within you. It can attempt to distract, but it cannot override your awareness once you recognize what is happening. And you are recognizing it now. Which means the next phase of your journey will require something different from you. Not fear, not hesitation, but clarity. Because the higher you rise, the more important it becomes to understand not just that opposition exists, but why it responds the way it does to your movement. And that is exactly what the next revelation will uncover. Type "I keep rising" in the comments if you are ready to move forward with clarity. Lesson code 4444 is now activated around your path. There is something about your silence that has always unsettled people. Not because you say nothing, but because of what your silence carries. Because when you choose not to speak, it is not emptiness. It is not confusion. It is not weakness. It is awareness, restraint, observation. And yet, the people around you have rarely understood it that way. They have misread you. They have looked at your quietness and assumed distance. They have seen your patience and mistaken it for passivity. They have watched you step back and interpreted it as insecurity, when in truth, it was discernment guiding your every move. And over time, this misinterpretation has created a subtle tension between who you are and how others perceive you. You have felt it. Those moments when you chose not to respond, and people filled in the silence with their own assumptions. Those times when you observed more than you spoke, and others grew uncomfortable, as if your presence alone was revealing something they were not ready to face. That strange shift in energy when you remain calm while others expect reaction, when you stay grounded while others anticipate emotion. It confuses them, because most people are used to noise. They are used to constant explanation, constant reaction, constant validation. They expect words to fill every gap, to clarify every thought, to justify every decision. And when you do not operate that way, when you move with intention instead of impulse, when you speak only when necessary instead of constantly, it disrupts their expectations. And disruption makes people uneasy. Archangel Michael reveals something important here. Your silence is not accidental. It is part of your alignment. It is the result of your awareness growing beyond the need to react to everything that crosses your path. You have learned, consciously or unconsciously, that not every situation deserves your voice, that not every opinion requires your response, that not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected in the moment. But others do not see that. They see what they understand, and what they understand is often limited to their own patterns, their own habits, their own way of moving through the world. So when they encounter your silence, they try to interpret it through their lens. And that is where the distortion begins. They may assume you are hiding something. They may believe you are withholding. They may think you are judging them, even when you are simply observing. They may label you as distant, disconnected, or even arrogant, simply because you do not engage in the same way they do. But what they fail to realize is this: your silence is not a rejection of them. It is a reflection of you. It reflects your growth. It reflects your awareness. It reflects your ability to see beyond the surface without needing to react to it immediately. And this is what makes your silence powerful and misunderstood at the same time. Because silence reveals more than words ever could. When you are silent, people begin to reveal themselves. They fill the space with their own thoughts, their own projections, their own assumptions. They speak more. They explain more. They expose more because your silence does not interrupt them. And in that process, you begin to see clearly. You begin to notice patterns in behavior, inconsistencies in words, shifts in energy that would have been missed if you were constantly speaking, constantly reacting, constantly engaging. Your silence becomes a space where truth surfaces not because you force it, but because you allow it. And that level of awareness is not comfortable for everyone. Some people prefer noise because it hides things. Silence, on the other hand, reveals them. This is why your presence can feel intense to others, even when you are doing nothing. Because your stillness holds weight and carries perception. It creates a mirror that reflects what others may not want to see within themselves. And when people are confronted with that reflection, they often react in one of two ways. They either withdraw or they attempt to define you before you define yourself. They create narratives about who you are, why you are the way you are, what your silence means. They try to make sense of you in ways that fit their understanding, even if those explanations are inaccurate. And if you are not careful, you may begin to internalize those interpretations. You may start questioning yourself. You may wonder if you should speak more, explain more, react more just to be understood. But Archangel Michael speaks clearly here. Do not trade your alignment for acceptance. You are not meant to explain yourself into being understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You are not meant to fill every silence just to make others comfortable. You are not meant to adjust your awareness to match environments that are not ready for it. Your silence is not your weakness. It is your strength. It is what allows you to move with clarity instead of confusion, to respond with intention instead of impulse, to see what is real instead of what is presented on the surface. It is what protects your energy from being pulled into unnecessary conflict, unnecessary explanation, unnecessary distraction. And most importantly, it is what keeps you aligned with your path. Because not everything requires your voice, but everything requires your awareness. And you have that awareness. You have developed it through experience, through observation, through moments where speaking would have cost you more than staying still. You have learned, sometimes the hard way, that silence can be more powerful than reaction. But now, you must also understand this. Your silence is not meant to isolate you. It is meant to guide you, to show you where you are aligned and where you are not, to reveal who understands your presence and who only understands your words, to help you discern where your voice will be received and where it will be misinterpreted. Because as you continue to rise, as your awareness deepens, as your presence carries more weight, the way you use your voice will matter more than ever. Not in quantity, but in precision. And that is what the next revelation will begin to uncover. Type "I move with purpose" in the comments if you understand the power of your silence. Blessing code 5555 is now surrounding your awareness. There is a level of awareness you are stepping into now that cannot be reversed. Once you see it, once you feel it, once it settles into your understanding, you cannot go back to viewing your life as something casual or unnoticed. Because what Archangel Michael is revealing in this moment is deeper than observation, deeper than attention. It is the reality that your life has been under a form of surveillance that extends beyond what you can see with your physical eyes. Not in a way that is meant to frighten you, but in a way that is meant to awaken you. Because there is a difference between being watched randomly and being monitored intentionally. And your life, your decisions, your movements have not gone unnoticed in the spiritual realm. There has been a consistent awareness surrounding your path, responding to the shifts you make, the choices you consider, the direction you begin to move toward. You may not have called it this before, but you have felt it. Those moments where you were about to make a decision and something within you paused, as if you were being guided to reconsider. Those times when you stepped into something that did not feel right, and almost immediately, circumstances began to shift, redirecting you away from it. The instances where clarity came suddenly, almost unexpectedly, just when you needed it most. That is not randomness. That is response. Archangel Michael reveals that your life exists within a space where both alignment and misalignment create reactions. Where your direction matters, not just for what you see, but for what unfolds around you. And because of what you carry, because of the mark that has already been placed upon your life, there is a level of attention that tracks your alignment closely. This is what many never realize. They believe their choices exist in isolation, that their decisions only affect what they can immediately see. But your path does not operate that way. Your alignment triggers movement. Your awareness creates shifts. Your decisions influence not just your immediate environment, but the direction of your unfolding journey. And that is why there is surveillance. Not just from opposition, but from protection. Because for every force that observes with intention, there is also a presence that guards with purpose. Archangel Michael does not stand at a distance. He stands within your path, aware of what surrounds you, aware of what approacheth, aware of what aligns and what does not. You are not unguarded, but you are observed. And understanding the difference between those two truths is what will ground you in clarity instead of confusion. Because when people sense that their life is being watched, they often react with fear. They begin to question every interaction, every moment, every shift in energy. They become overwhelmed by the idea that something is always paying attention. But that is not the awareness you are being called into. You are not being called into fear. You are being called into precision, into understanding that your life carries weight, and that weight creates response, that your presence is not neutral, your movement is not unnoticed, your direction is not without impact. And once you accept that, you begin to move differently. You begin to recognize that not every opportunity is meant for you, even if it appears beneficial. You begin to sense when something is aligned versus when it is simply available. You begin to trust the subtle shifts within you, the quiet signals that guide you toward clarity and away from confusion. Because surveillance does not just observe your actions, it responds to your alignment. And this is where your awareness becomes your greatest strength. You are not here to live carelessly, moving in every direction without intention. You are here to move with understanding, with discernment, with a recognition that your path is unfolding within a larger structure that responds to who you are becoming. This is why certain doors close quickly. This is why some connections feel strong at first but dissolve over time. This is why moments of clarity come suddenly, shifting your perspective in ways you did not expect. Because your life is not meant to remain static. It is meant to evolve. And that evolution is being guided, observed, and at times corrected. Not to control you, but to align you. And once you understand that, something within you begins to settle. You stop resisting the redirections. You stop questioning every closed door. You stop assuming that every delay is a setback. Instead, you begin to see the pattern. You begin to understand that your path is being refined in real time, that your awareness is being sharpened through experience, that your alignment is being strengthened through every decision you make. And this is where your responsibility deepens. Because awareness without action creates stagnation, but awareness with alignment creates movement. You are no longer in a position where you can ignore what you sense. You are no longer at a level where you can move without consideration of what feels right and what does not. You are being called to respond to your awareness, to trust it, to follow it even when it leads you away from what is familiar. Because what is familiar is not always what is aligned. And your life is no longer centered around comfort. It is centered around purpose. And purpose requires precision. It requires you to recognize that your path is being observed, not to limit you, but to guide you. Not to restrict your movement, but to refine it. Not to create fear, but to create clarity. And the more you embrace that clarity, the more your path begins to unfold with intention. Because you are not moving alone. You are moving within a system of response, of awareness, of guidance that has been present long before you understood it. And this is only the beginning of what you are being shown. Because what comes next will reveal how this awareness extends beyond the unseen and begins to surface in the visible world around you. Type "I move with awareness" in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 6666 is now activated around your path. There is something happening around you that you have sensed but never fully confirmed. It does not come to you directly. It does not present itself openly. But it exists in fragments, in subtle shifts, in moments where something feels slightly out of place without clear explanation. And what Archangel Michael is revealing now is this: There are conversations about you that you have never heard, yet you have felt the impact of them. These are not always loud conversations. They are not always obvious or confrontational. In fact, most of them are quiet, indirect, carried in tones that sound casual but hold deeper meaning. They happen in spaces where your name is mentioned without your presence, in rooms you were never invited into, in discussions that shape perceptions before you ever have the chance to speak for yourself. And somehow you have felt it. You have walked into environments where the energy feels different, even though nothing has been said to you directly. You have noticed shifts in behavior, subtle changes in tone, moments where people seem to respond to you based on something you never expressed. And it has left you questioning, wondering if you are overthinking or if something deeper is at play. You are not overthinking. You are perceiving. Because words do not disappear once they are spoken. They carry energy. They create impressions. They move through spaces, influencing how others see, think, and respond. And when your name becomes part of those conversations, whether in curiosity, confusion, or misinterpretation, that energy begins to circulate. Archangel Michael makes this clear. Not every conversation about you is harmful, but not every conversation is harmless either. Some speak about you because they are trying to understand you. They are observing your life, your choices, your direction, and attempting to make sense of it in ways that fit their own understanding. But because they do not have full clarity, their interpretations become incomplete, sometimes distorted. They speak based on fragments, not the full picture. Others speak from comparison. They measure your movement against their own, your growth against their progress, your decisions against their expectations. And in that comparison, your name becomes part of a narrative that reflects their perspective, not your reality. And then there are those who speak from projection. They take what they feel, what they assume, what they believe, and place it onto you without confirmation. They create versions of you in their mind, and those versions become the subject of their conversations. Not who you truly are, but who they perceive you to be based on limited understanding. And this is where the distortion deepens. Because over time, these conversations begin to shape an image of you that exists outside of your control. An image that moves through spaces you have never entered, influencing how others approach you, how they respond to you, how they interpret your presence before you even speak. And you feel it. That moment when someone interacts with you based on something unspoken. That subtle tension when you sense that their perception of you has been influenced by something you cannot see. That quiet awareness that there is more being said about you than what reaches your ears. This is not coincidence. This is the effect of unseen conversations. But here is where your understanding must shift. You are not here to chase those conversations. You are not here to correct every narrative. You are not here to control how others speak about you in spaces where you are not present. Because if you attempt to do that, you will lose your focus, your energy, your alignment trying to manage something that was never within your control to begin with. Archangel Michael speaks with authority here. Let what is spoken about you reveal itself through time, not through your reaction. Because truth has a way of surfacing without force. Misunderstandings have a way of unraveling without confrontation. And those who are meant to see you clearly will not rely solely on what they hear. They will recognize what they observe directly. But this does not mean you remain unaware. It means you remain grounded. You understand that these conversations exist, but you do not allow them to define you. You recognize that your name may move through spaces you do not see, but you do not let that distract you from your path. You accept that not everyone will understand you fully, but you do not shrink yourself to fit incomplete perceptions. Because your responsibility is not to manage perception. It is to maintain alignment. And alignment creates consistency. Consistency creates clarity. And clarity, over time, overrides distortion. This is why your presence matters more than any conversation. Because what you embody consistently will eventually speak louder than what is said in your absence. The way you move, the way you respond, the way you remain grounded in who you are, that becomes the truth that cannot be easily replaced by words. But you must be patient with that process, because not everything reveals itself immediately. Some truths take time to surface. Some perceptions take time to shift. Some conversations lose their influence only when reality consistently contradicts them. And that is what you are building now. A reality that does not need to defend itself constantly. A presence that does not need to explain itself endlessly. A path that speaks through its direction, not through reaction. And this is where your strength deepens. Because instead of being pulled into unseen conversations, you rise above them. Instead of reacting to what is said, you remain anchored in what is real. Instead of chasing understanding from others, you stand firm in your own clarity. And that clarity becomes your protection. Because once you stop trying to control what is said about you, you reclaim your energy. You reclaim your focus. You reclaim your direction. And you move forward without being pulled into spaces that were never meant to hold your attention. But this awareness is leading you somewhere deeper. Because the reason these conversations exist is connected to something much larger than perception. It is connected to your position within your own bloodline. And that is what the next revelation will begin to uncover. Type "I stand in truth" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7777 is now surrounding your path. There is a reason your life has felt heavier than it should at times, and it is not because you are weak. It is not because you are doing something wrong. It is not because you are unlucky or out of alignment with life itself. It is because you are carrying something that was never meant to be light. You are carrying position. Not position in the way the world defines it, not status or recognition, or titles that can be seen and measured, but position within your bloodline. A role that was not assigned by people, but embedded into your existence long before you understood what it meant. And that role comes with weight, responsibility, and at times, isolation that cannot always be explained. You have felt it. That sense that you are different from those around you, even within your own family. That your perspective does not fully match theirs. That your awareness reaches beyond conversations that others seem comfortable having. That your desire for growth, clarity, and change creates tension in spaces where stagnation has been normalized. You have wondered why it feels like you are carrying expectations that were never spoken. Why it seems like you are the one who notices what others ignore. Why you are the one who feels the need to question patterns that everyone else accepts without resistance. Archangel Michael reveals the truth. You are not just part of your bloodline, you are a turning point within it. And turning points are never comfortable, because they disrupt what hath been established. They challenge what hath been repeated. They expose what has been hidden beneath familiarity and tradition. And when you begin to step into that role, even unconsciously, everything around you begins to react. This is why you have experienced tension in places that should feel natural. Why certain conversations feel limiting instead of connecting. Why you sense resistance not just from individuals, but from patterns that seem to repeat within your family, generation after generation. Because you are not here to continue those patterns. You are here to break them. And breaking patterns creates friction. Not because others are intentionally opposing you, but because change disrupts what people have learned to accept. It challenges comfort. It questions what has been normalized. It forces awareness where there was once silence. And not everyone is ready for that. Some will resist it without even realizing why. Some will misunderstand your intentions, believing that your desire for change is a rejection of them. Some will try to pull you back into what is familiar, not out of harm, but out of their own comfort with what they know. And this is where the weight becomes real, because you begin to feel the pull from both directions. The pull to remain connected to where you come from, and the pull to move forward into what you are becoming. The pull to maintain peace and the pull to honor truth. The pull to stay within what is accepted and the pull to step into what is aligned. And that tension can feel isolating. It can make you question whether you are doing the right thing, whether the path you are taking is worth the distance it creates, whether the clarity you are gaining is worth the misunderstanding that sometimes follows. But Archangel Michael speaks clearly here. You were not chosen for comfort. You were chosen for transformation. And transformation always requires separation from what no longer aligns. Not always physically, not always in obvious ways, but internally, mentally, emotionally. It requires you to see differently, to think differently, to respond differently than what has been modeled before you. And that difference is what creates the shift. Because every pattern that has existed within your bloodline has been sustained by repetition, by people following what came before without questioning it, without challenging it, without stepping outside of it. But you are not repeating. You are recognizing. You are observing what has been carried forward, what has been passed down, what has been accepted without awareness. And once you recognize it, you cannot unsee it. You cannot return to moving through life without noticing the patterns that once went unquestioned. And that recognition is where your power begins. Because you cannot break what you do not see. And now you see. You see the patterns in behavior. You see the cycles in relationships. You see the repetition in decisions, in outcomes, in dynamics that seem to repeat themselves across time. And once you see it, you have a choice, to continue it or to interrupt it. And that interruption is your assignment. But it is also your challenge. Because breaking patterns does not always come with immediate understanding from others. It does not always come with support or validation. Sometimes it comes with resistance, confusion, even distance. But that does not mean you are wrong. It means you are early. Early in the process of change. Early in the shift that others will eventually recognize. Early in the transformation that will redefine what comes after you. Because what you break will not be passed down. What you heal will not be repeated. What you change will not need to be carried forward by those who come after you. And that is the weight you carry. Not just for yourself, but for what comes beyond you. And this is why the attention around you feels different. Because you are not just living your life. You are altering a pattern. And patterns resist change. But they cannot resist it forever. Because once awareness enters a cycle, it cannot continue in the same way. And you are that awareness. Which means your role is not small. It is foundational. And this is why the next revelation is critical. Because once you understand your position within your bloodline, you must also understand the danger of returning to what you have already outgrown. Type "I am the shift" in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 8888 is now activated around your bloodline. As you stand in this truth, understand that your obedience does not just impact your life, it opens doors for countless others who are still searching for clarity. Every seed you sow into this mission becomes a torch in someone else's darkness, a divine spark that reaches a soul standing at the edge of transformation. The word speaks, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy," and right now, that promise is alive and speaking over your giving. I say this with conviction. I step into this moment, and I respond with action, not delay. This is not charity. It is alignment with a higher calling that flows through every message, every word, every life touched. Your support through PayPal, whether through the link in the description or the QR code before you, becomes a river that carries truth into places you may never see but heaven will always record. As you release your seed, expect divine multiplication, unexpected favor, and spiritual clarity to follow you. Now move, activate your giving, and become part of what God is expanding through this message. There is a quiet danger that does not announce itself loudly, does not force its way into your life, does not appear as an obvious threat, and yet it has the power to undo everything you have been awakening into. It is not new opposition. It is not unfamiliar resistance. It is something much closer than that. It is familiarity. And what Archangel Michael reveals in this moment is this: the greatest trap in your current season is not moving forward into the unknown, it is being pulled back into what you already outgrew. You have changed. Even if others have not fully acknowledged it, even if your environment still looks similar, even if parts of your life still resemble what they used to be, you are not the same. Your awareness has expanded. Your perception has sharpened. Your sensitivity to what is aligned and what is not has deepened in ways you cannot reverse. And because of that, what once felt normal no longer feels the same. You have noticed it. The conversations that used to flow easily now feel repetitive, even draining. The environments that once felt comfortable now feel restrictive, as if they cannot hold who you are becoming. The patterns you once participated in without question now stand out clearly, revealing themselves in ways you cannot ignore. And yet there is still a pull. A subtle, persistent pull to return. To go back to what is known, what is familiar, what requires less awareness and less responsibility. Because familiarity offers something that growth does not always provide in the beginning: comfort, predictability, a sense of belonging that does not require explanation. And that is where the trap forms. Because what is familiar is not always what is aligned. Archangel Michael speaks with precision here. The moment you become aware of a pattern, you are no longer meant to return to it unconsciously. But awareness alone does not remove the pull. It only reveals it. And this is where your discipline must rise. Because returning is easy. It does not require effort. It does not require courage. It does not require change. It simply requires you to follow what you have already done before. To fall back into habits, into conversations, into connections that feel natural because they are known. But what is known is not always what is right for where you are now. This is why the pull can feel so convincing. It does not appear as something negative. It does not present itself as a threat. It feels familiar. It feels safe. It feels like something you have already navigated before, something you already understand. But what it does not show you immediately is the cost. The cost of returning is not always immediate. It is subtle. It shows up in the gradual loss of clarity, in the quiet dimming of awareness, in the slow reintroduction of patterns you had already begun to recognize and release. You begin to compromise in small ways. You begin to ignore what you sense. You begin to silence your awareness just enough to fit back into spaces that no longer align with you. And over time, that creates a disconnection not from others, but from yourself. Because once you have seen clearly, returning to blindness is not peaceful. It is uncomfortable in a different way. You may feel accepted but not aligned. You may feel included but not understood. You may feel familiar but not fulfilled. And that is the conflict. Because your awareness will not allow you to fully settle into what you have outgrown. Archangel Michael reveals that this is where many people lose their progress, not because they were not capable of moving forward, but because they underestimated the pull of what they already knew. They assumed that once they became aware, the old patterns would lose their influence entirely. But that is not how it works. Patterns do not disappear immediately. They wait. They present themselves again, often in familiar forms, inviting you to return. Not aggressively, not forcefully, but subtly, through comfort, through memory, through the ease of what you have already experienced. And in that moment, your choice becomes clear. Not easy, but clear. You either move forward with awareness or you return to what no longer supports your growth. And this is why your current season requires more than understanding. It requires commitment. Commitment to your alignment, even when it feels unfamiliar. Commitment to your growth, even when it creates distance from what you once knew. Commitment to your awareness, even when it reveals things you would rather ignore. Because you cannot build something new while holding on to what belongs to your past. You cannot step into clarity while entertaining confusion. You cannot move into alignment while returning to misalignment. And you already know this. You have felt it. Every time you moved forward, and then looked back, something within you resisted. Not because you were afraid of the past, but because you had already moved beyond it. Your awareness had already shifted. Your perception had already changed. And that change cannot be undone. Which means the path ahead is not about returning. It is about continuing. Continuing to trust what you sense. Continuing to follow what aligns. Continuing to move forward, even when the direction is not fully clear yet. Because clarity does not always come before movement. Sometimes it comes through it. And that is where you are now. Standing between what is familiar and what is aligned. Between what you know and what you are becoming. And the next step is not about comfort. It is about decision. Because once you choose not to return, everything begins to shift in a way that cannot be reversed. And that is exactly what the next revelation will uncover. Type "I do not go back" in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 9999 is now activated around your path. There comes a point in your journey where guessing is no longer enough, where assumptions begin to fall away, where you realize that moving forward blindly is no longer an option. And that point is exactly where you are now. What you are experiencing is not confusion, even if it has felt that way at times. It is the activation of something deeper, something sharper, something far more precise than logic alone. It is discernment. And once discernment begins to activate within you, everything changes. Archangel Michael speaks clearly in this moment. You are no longer meant to rely solely on what you see, what you hear, or what is presented on the surface. You are being shifted into a space where you sense beyond appearances, where you recognize what is not being said, where you feel what is aligned and what is not without needing full explanation. You have already felt this happening. That white knowing that appears without warning. That moment when something seems right on the outside, but something within you says otherwise. That subtle pause in your spirit before making a decision, as if something is asking you to look deeper, to wait, to reconsider. At first, you may have doubted it. You may have questioned whether it was real, whether it was just your thoughts, your imagination, your overanalysis. But over time, you began to notice a pattern. When you ignored that feeling, things became complicated. When you followed it, things aligned in ways you could not have predicted. That is not coincidence. That is discernment learning to speak. And now, it is becoming stronger. But here is the truth that many do not understand. Discernment is not comfortable. It does not always confirm what you want to believe. It does not always support what feels familiar. It does not always align with what others expect of you. In fact, it often does the opposite. It reveals what is hidden beneath the surface. It exposes inconsistencies in people, in environments, in opportunities. It shows you the difference between what looks good and what actually is good for you. And that level of clarity can feel isolating at times because not everyone around you is seeing what you see. This is why you have started to feel different in certain situations. You may be in a conversation, but something within you is focused on what is not being said. You may be in an opportunity, but your attention is drawn to details others overlook. You may be around people who seem genuine, yet something in your spirit remains cautious, observant, aware. And that awareness creates tension. Because part of you wants to trust what is in front of you, to move forward without questioning everything. But another part of you, the deeper part, recognizes that not everything is as it appears. And that is where discernment is guiding you. Archangel Michael makes this clear. Discernment is not meant to make you suspicious of everything. It is meant to make you aware of what aligns and what does not. There is a difference. Suspicion creates fear. Discernment creates clarity. Suspicion isolates. Discernment guides. You are not being called to doubt everything. You are being called to recognize what is true for you. And that recognition requires stillness. Because discernment does not speak loudly. It does not force itself into your awareness. It appears in quiet moments, in subtle signals, in shifts that are easy to overlook if you are constantly distracted. And this is why your silence, your awareness, your observation from earlier, all of it connects to this moment. Because discernment requires space. Space to notice. Space to feel. Space to understand without immediate reaction. And the more you honor that space, the stronger your discernment becomes. You begin to see patterns before they fully form. You begin to recognize intentions before they are revealed. You begin to sense alignment before taking action. And this is where your power deepens. Because discernment is not just about avoiding what is wrong. It is about moving toward what is right. It is about recognizing opportunities that are truly aligned with your path, not just those that appear beneficial on the surface. It is about choosing connections that resonate with your growth, not just those that feel familiar. It is about making decisions that support your direction, not just those that offer immediate comfort. And that level of clarity changes everything. Because once you see clearly, you cannot move carelessly. Once you recognize truth, you cannot fully entertain illusion. Once you feel alignment, you cannot comfortably settle for misalignment. And this is why your current season feels different. You are not just living. You are discerning. You are not just reacting. You are recognizing. You are not just moving. You are choosing with intention. And that intention is what will define your next phase. But here is where the responsibility becomes real. Because discernment without action creates frustration. You may see clearly, but if you ignore what you see, you create conflict within yourself. You may recognize misalignment, but if you remain in it, you weaken your own clarity. You may sense direction, but if you hesitate to follow it, you delay your own progress. And that is where many struggle. Not in see, but in acting on what they see. But you are not being called to hesitate. You are being called to trust. To trust that what you sense is not random. To trust that the clarity you are receiving is meant to guide you. To trust that your awareness is developing for a reason. Because what lies ahead will require you to move with precision. Not based on what others say. Not based on what appears easiest. but based on what you know even when you cannot fully explain it. And that is where your next step will take you. Because discernment is not the final stage. It is preparation. Preparation for the moment where everything begins to separate clearly and your alignment becomes undeniable. Type "I trust my discernment" in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 1010 is now activated around your awareness. There is a moment that arrives in every path of transformation where things no longer blend together the way they used to. What once felt connected begins to separate. What once felt aligned begins to feel distant. What once felt natural begins to feel forced. And this moment, this exact moment, is where you are now. It is not random. It is not confusion. It is separation. Archangel Michael speaks with clarity here. Before alignment becomes visible, separation must take place. Not as punishment, not as loss, but as refinement. Because you cannot fully step into what is meant for you while still holding on to what no longer fits who you are becoming. And this is where the tension you've been feeling begins to make sense. You have noticed the shifts. The way certain conversations no longer hold your attention the way they once did. The way certain relationships feel different even if nothing obvious has changed. The way environments that once felt familiar now feel limiting, as if they cannot contain your awareness anymore. You have felt the distance even when you are physically present. And that distance has made you question. You have asked yourself if you are changing too much, if you are pulling away unnecessarily, if you are creating space where none should exist. You have wondered if the disconnection is something you are causing or something that is happening beyond your control. But Archangel Michael reveals the truth. This separation is not something you are forcing. It is something you are recognizing. Because alignment and misalignment cannot occupy the same space indefinitely. At some point, they begin to separate naturally. What resonates stays. What does not begins to fall away. And that process can feel uncomfortable. Because separation is rarely loud. It does not always come with clear endings or defined conclusions. It shows up in subtle ways, in shifts of energy, in reduced connection, in conversations that no longer flow the same, in moments where you feel present but not fully engaged. And those subtle shifts create uncertainty. You may find yourself trying to hold on to what is changing, trying to restore what no longer feels the same, trying to reconnect in ways that feel forced rather than natural. Because part of you remembers what it used to be, and that memory creates attachment. But here is what you must understand. You are not meant to recreate what no longer aligns. You are meant to release it. Not with resistance, not with resentment, but with clarity. Because holding on to what is separating will only create more tension within you. It will pull you between two directions, keeping you from fully stepping into either. It will delay your alignment while maintaining your attachment. And that is where many remain stuck. Not because they do not see the shift, but because they resist it. They try to maintain connections that are naturally dissolving. They try to force alignment where it no longer exists. They try to keep everything together, even when everything is clearly moving apart. But Archangel Michael makes this clear. Separation is not the end of something valuable. It is the clearing of space for what is truly aligned. Because alignment requires room. Room for clarity. Room for growth. Room for connections that resonate with who you are now, not who you used to be. And that room cannot exist if it is already filled with what no longer fits. This is why you are being guided to observe, not to force. To notice what is shifting without immediately trying to fix it. To allow what is separating to do so without resistance. Because what remains after separation is what is real. What remains is what aligns. What remains is what supports your direction, your awareness, your growth. And that is where your next phase begins. But this requires trust. Trust that what is leaving is not meant to stay. Trust that what is changing is not meant to remain the same. Trust that what feels uncertain now is leading you into something clearer, something more precise, something more aligned with who you are becoming. Because alignment is not about holding on to everything. It is about standing within what truly resonates with your path. And that means letting go of what does not, even when it feels unfamiliar, even when it creates temporary distance, even when it challenges your sense of connection. Because what you are moving into requires a different environment, a different level of understanding, a different type of connection that cannot exist within the structures of your past. And that is what is being prepared now, through separation, through refinement, through the quiet shifting of everything that no longer aligns. You are not losing, you are aligning. And that alignment will become clearer with every step you take forward without resistance. Because once separation completes its process, what remains will no longer confuse you. It will confirm you. It will support you. It will move with you, not against you. And that is where your final step begins. Because what comes next is not about understanding your path, it is about fully stepping into it. Type "I choose alignment" in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 1111 is now activated around your path. There comes a moment where everything you have heard, everything you have felt, everything you have been slowly awakening to demands a response. Not tomorrow. Not when it feels easier. Not when everything is perfectly clear. But now. This is that moment. Archangel Michael does not whisper here. He does not suggest. He does not leave room for hesitation. He speaks with authority, with clarity, with purpose. You can no longer remain in between. You cannot remain partially aware. You cannot remain partially aligned. You cannot remain in a space where you see the truth but still entertain what contradicts it. Because everything that has been revealed to you up until this point was not given for reflection alone. It was given for activation. You have seen the patterns. You have felt the opposition. You have recognized the watchers. You have understood the weight of your position within your bloodline. You have become aware of the conversations, the misinterpretations, the subtle shifts that surround your life. And now there is no returning to who you were before you saw all of this. That version of you no longer exists. And the longer you try to hold on to it, the more tension you will feel within yourself. Because you are standing at the edge of identity. Not the identity that was shaped by others' perceptions. Not the identity that was built around comfort, familiarity, or expectation. But the identity that has always been within you, waiting for you to fully step into it. And stepping into it requires something most people avoid. Decision. A clear, unwavering decision to rise into who you are without shrinking, without explaining, without seeking permission from those who cannot understand your path. Because understanding will not always come from others. That alignment must come from you. Archangel Michael reveals something that cannot be ignored. The reason your life has felt watched, the reason opposition has increased, the reason patterns have been revealed, the reason separation has begun is because you are no longer hidden. You are visible. Not just to others but to yourself. And once you see yourself clearly, once you recognize your position, your awareness, your alignment, you cannot pretend otherwise. You cannot act as if you do not know. You cannot move as if you are still unaware. Because awareness creates responsibility, and responsibility creates direction. This is why everything has been leading to this point. Not to overwhelm you, but to prepare you. Because stepping into your true identity is not about becoming something new. It is about removing everything that is not you. The doubts that were never yours. The limitations that were placed on you. The patterns that you inherited but were never meant to carry forward. The expectations that tried to define you before you defined yourself. All of it is being stripped away. Not to leave you empty, but to reveal you fully. And that revelation requires courage. Because standing in your identity will not always be comfortable. It will not always be understood. It will not always be supported in the way you expect. But it will be aligned. And alignment is what sustains you when everything else feels uncertain. Archangel Michael gives the final command: rise. Not gradually. Not partially. Fully. Rise in your awareness. Rise in your clarity. Rise in your decisions. Rise in the way you carry yourself, the way you move, the way you respond to what no longer aligns. Because you are no longer in a phase of preparation. You are in a phase of embodiment, where what you know must become how you live, where what you see must guide how you move, where what you feel must shape what you choose. And this is where everything begins to shift. Not around you first, but within you. Because once you fully step into who you are, the external begins to align with the internal. The confusion begins to clear. The resistance begins to make sense. The path begins to unfold in ways that no longer feel random. Because you are no longer moving without awareness. You are moving with intention. And intention changes everything. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of your true alignment. The moment where you stop questioning your difference and start owning it. The moment where you stop shrinking your presence and start standing fully within it. The moment where you stop wondering why your life feels different and start understanding that it was always meant to be. You were never meant to be ordinary. And now you are no longer allowed to live as if you are. Type "I rise fully" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated around your life. As you rise into this truth, understand this sacred reality. Your obedience in this moment is not just for you. It becomes a doorway for countless souls who are still waiting to awaken. Every seed you release into this mission becomes a flame in someone else's darkness, a living testimony that God is still reaching His people. The word declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over," and that promise is speaking directly into your life right now. I hear the call clearly, and I respond. I will not delay. I will act in faith. I will sow into what God is multiplying. This is not support for a channel. This is participation in a divine assignment that flows through every message you receive. Your giving through PayPal, through the link in the description or the QR code placed before you, becomes a river that carries light, truth, and awakening across lives you may never meet but heaven will always remember. As you give, expect acceleration, favor, and divine alignment to follow you in ways that cannot be explained. Now act, release your seed and step into the overflow of what God is doing through this message.